Welcome to Profiles in Faith number 8. It's really the second part of the story of Joseph saving Egypt and Israel, chapter 43. And if you remember from last week, Joseph's brothers had come down to get food during the famine, and they had gotten food, and then they went back, and Joseph is still in Egypt. His brothers have gone back, and his father Jacob is distraught because one of his sons, Simeon, is still in Egypt. And now, in order for them to go back and get food a second time, they have to take Benjamin, the youngest, as well. And so now we begin the story of their second journey from the land of Canaan back to the land of Egypt. And we'll see what happens there. The famine was still severe in the land, and when Jacob and all their family had eaten all the grain they had bought from Egypt, he told his sons, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you.' If you send your brother, if you will send your brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down," because the man said, "You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you." Joseph had scared them. They knew that they're not going to show up if they don't bring the brother. So the story goes on. The older brother Judah guarantees to his father that he will keep Benjamin safe. A guarantee I'm not sure that he had the ability to carry out, but he was willing to do his best. So Joseph's brothers returned back to Egypt with not just the silver to buy the grain, but even more gifts, because they were frightened about what would happen. And when they arrived, they were even more frightened when Joseph invited them to his house, and they didn't know what to expect. Verse 26, they're all back in Egypt with Joseph. Joseph came home. They presented him the gifts they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and then he said, "How is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well." And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. He got to see his brother, who was his mother's Rachel's other son. Well, Joseph then had them stay in his house and have a meal together. But the part of the context that is kind of vague, but we see it here in this verse, is Egyptians and Hebrews. There were clear differences. The Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews. That was, I don't know if it was a law, but it certainly was the custom. And so what happens is Joseph has them fix the meal, all his servants. All of the Egyptians have to go, and Joseph is willing to sit and eat with them. Now you wonder what the rest of the Egyptians were thinking about this, because why would he do this? I mean, did they know that he was originally Hebrew or not? I don't know. But anyway, so let's see. So after the meal, Joseph makes sure that their sacks are full of grain, and they put back in the sacks the silver. These brothers didn't know this. Their own silver, and then a silver cup from Joseph's house, as if they had stolen it. They didn't know he did that. So after they started to leave, Joseph has them arrested for theft of the cup. Oh boy. looks like Joseph is going to make them pay. And yet the brother Judah asked for a pardon and tells them about their father Jacob, who is aging and who will not survive if he loses his other brothers. Chapter 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone leave." So there was no one with Joseph when he revealed himself to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, that had been within him for years. And Pharaoh's household heard all about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. They knew what they had done. And here, their brother, whom they had sold and almost killed, was now the number 2 guy in Egypt. And they were afraid that because Joseph could have wiped him out immediately. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." And when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Wow. Joseph realizes that God sent him ahead in a horrible way. I mean, he had to go as a slave and deal with all the things that we've talked about. And yet Joseph sees, not only did he have the vision to interpret dreams, he had the vision to see that God had sent him there to save the rest of his family. For 2 years now there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 there will be no plowing and reaping. It's going to be a long haul. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve you for a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, "This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. So come down to me and don't delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen," which is their part of Egypt, "and be near me, you and your children and grandchildren, your flocks, herds, all that you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt and about everything you've seen, and bring my father down here quickly." And then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterward, his brothers talked with him. Now we're going to see that they are really still not sure about trusting him, but they are discovering that they really don't have a choice. So they ended up going back to Canaan. They get Jacob, the father. They convince him about what's going on. So chapter 46 says, "So Israel," which is, remember, Jacob's new name, "set out with all that was his, family, grandchildren, flocks, everything that he has. And when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And there God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, 'Jacob, Jacob, here I am. I am the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you and surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes.'" So Jacob Israel, who was afraid he'd lost his son Joseph, now knows that his son will be there for the rest of his life. So all those who went to Egypt with Jacob, his direct descendants, not counting wives, numbered 66 persons. And with the 2 sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the member of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt, they were all 70 people. So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. This is the interesting part here. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. So in order to buy food, they sold their property. So before this, Egyptians were landowners themselves, but the land became Pharaoh's. And Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. So the price of survival was a change in the status of the people from being landowners to being really servants of Pharaoh. However, Joseph did not buy the land of the priests because they already received an allotment from Pharaoh and had enough food. So now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there and fruitful and increased in number. So Jacob, the father, lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. Wow. So then we have time passes, and we have these few words about Jacob's death at the age of 147. Before he died, he gave them his instructions. I'm about to be gathered to my people. Now, isn't that an interesting way and a nice vision of what death is I'm going to be gathered back with my people for this reunion. He said, bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, back in Canaan, in what today is Hebron. The cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. Abraham and Sarah were buried there. Isaac and Rebekah were buried there. And there I buried Leah, his first wife. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. So when Jacob finished giving instructions to his son, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in Egypt in his service to embalm his father. So they embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptian mourned him 70 days. So Joseph got the full treatment of respect at his death, even though he was in Egypt, and the Egyptians were the ones who had to do it for him. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, if I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me and tell him, my father has made me swear an oath. I'm about to die. Bury me back in the tomb I dug for myself back in Canaan. Pharaoh gave permission. Go up and bury your father, and as he made you swear to. So Pharaoh let Joseph take them back and take his father back. And Pharaoh's officials accompanied him. Because Joseph was the most important person other than Pharaoh in the land. And so what an interesting thing that Jacob, as he was going back home to be buried, had all of these dignitaries of the court of Egypt who accompanied Joseph back. And the household and the brothers and chariots and horsemen. It was a very large company. Well, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they had worried, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for the wrongs we did to him? So they told Joseph, your father left these words that you are to forgive your brothers and the sins. Now please forgive the servants of your father. When Joseph got that message, he cried. And his brothers threw themselves down and said, we are your slaves. Joseph said to them, what he's told him before. Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them. He really did come to understand and forgive them. So then, Joseph's father's gone. The years begin to pass. Joseph stayed and lived in Egypt along with all of his father's family. Joseph lived to be 110 and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. So he was great-great-great-great-grandfather before he died. So then when Joseph was coming to the end of his life, he told his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones from this place in Egypt and take them back as well. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Of course, now they're all stuck in Egypt. They were saved, but they will be there for several generations. But it's interesting, Joseph was able to hear God instruct him about forgiveness and about that this was part of his plan. And I suspect that that's a tough thing to do, but for each of us in our lives, perhaps we need to ask, what does God want us to do? Does God want us to be resentful and carry on bitterness, or to find forgiveness and see what kind of life is in store? Joseph found a wonderful life for him and saved his family and saved all the people of Egypt. So never underestimate what God can do. Thank you. Next week, we will find out what happens to the Israelites in Egypt years later. Have a good day.